All right, I think we will get started. It is 7 o'clock. So good evening and thank you for joining us for this District 24 General Election Legislative Forum hosted by the League of Women Voters, and I'm Angie Martin, a League member from the Valley City area. The League of Women Voters, which is 104 years old, is a nonpartisan civic organization. The League's mission is to empower voters and defend democracy at the national and state levels, as well as right here at the local level. If you would like to learn more about the League, please check out the materials on the information table out in the lobby. And if you would like to learn more, you can visit either the national or state websites or find us on Facebook, or ask one of the volunteers that's here tonight. You can tell us because we all have a silver badge on. I'd like to let you know also that on the sign up or on the table out in the lobby, there are sign up forms for anybody who would like to join the League of Women Voters. It is open to both men and women. We have men and women even in this regional one of ours. If you would like, you can fill out the application form that's available, leave a check, and we can send it into Fargo, or like I say, you can go online for it. First of all, we'd like to thank all the candidates. We applaud these folks for stepping forward to serve the citizens in public office and for participating in this excellent opportunity to connect with the voters they are seeking to represent. Finally, I want to thank our extraordinary team members who have cheerfully volunteered their time to make this a very American event happen. I can tell you their efforts have been a work of patriotism and love, and in this case, it's a love of our country and its voter-directed democratic form of government, which has endured for 235 years. I also want to point out that the restrooms in this building are located on the first floor and through a door downstairs. If you haven't done so already, please take a look at the voting information available at the literature table. Also, there are 5 measures. There's information on that on this round table at the back of this room. Among many other items, you'll find copies, of course, of the 5 North Dakota ballot measures, which are very informative, and measures that you'll be voting on in November. We also encourage you to go online to vote411.org. This is a League of Women Voters online voters guide. The site includes all the voting information you might want or need, not only for District 24, but for other statewide races as well. We encourage you to ask questions tonight, so please write each of your questions on the provided note cards, 1 question per note card preferably. Then get the attention of one of the volunteers who will collect your cards. We'll quickly sort through the questions and bring them to the moderator. If you need more note cards, raise your hand and a volunteer will bring them to you. Each candidate will respond to each question, so your question or questions need to be answerable by all the candidates and not just one in particular. Time may not allow for every question to be answered during the forum, so if we don't get to your question, we encourage you to discuss it with the candidates in person after the forum closes. Due to the fact that this forum is a timed and nonpartisan event, we ask that the audience show equal respect to all participants, so please no applause or verbal outcries. We are very fortunate this evening to have with us a community-minded education leader who has generously offered his time and talents to moderate the forum. I'm delighted to introduce Dr. Dan Johnston, Superintendent of Fort Ransom Elementary School and an active rancher. With degrees from Concordia College, NDSU, and UND, he served 28 years as Superintendent of Lisbon Public School District. Dr. Johnston is also an executive committee member of the National Rural Education Association and is an NDSOS board member. His decades of nonpartisan work in K-12 education have made him a gifted communicator who is scrupulously fair and unbiased. Charlene Rawson will be our timer tonight, and Vicki Rosano will sort through questions. So, Dr. Johnston, let's meet our District 24 candidates for the North Dakota Senate and House.
Thank you, Angie. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the District 24 Legislative Candidate Forum, hosted by the League of Women Voters, who I am proudly now a member. I am honored to serve as your moderator for this important event. I would like to thank those volunteers here from both Lisbon and Valley City that helped organize and set up this event. A big thank you goes out to Dr. Chuck Long for covering the cost of renting this historic facility this evening, and to John Anderson, who is the Vice President of the Opera House Foundation, and he is doing our sound and recording of this event. As your moderator, I will remain neutral and ensure that all candidates are given equal time and opportunity to respond. I'll take a brief moment to explain some of the procedures. And as moderator, I set the rules. All candidates are here. We ask that the audience, first of all, put their cell phones on silent so that we're not interrupted by cell phone noise. The heart of this event is your questions. We encourage everyone to participate by asking questions. If you have not filled out a question at this time, please do so. Put it on a note card. Make sure that we can read it, that it's clear, and then we'll collect it. One of the volunteers will collect it, and our sorter, Vicki, over here, will make sure that we get them in a certain order. For example, I think we've already got like 10 questions on Measure 4. So we're going to try to consolidate those and break that down a little bit so that we don't have these candidates up here answering 4 questions on one measure. The questions then are related to the group together to ensure all questions must be able to be answered by all candidates. You cannot direct a question just at one. They're not accepted. Tonight, we're going to start out with this format. Each candidate will be given 2 minutes for opening remarks. Following, then, we'll have questions. Each question will be asked. They get 1 minute to respond, and I'm going to change up the rotation on this. So Nancy, for example, if you are first on the first question, you'll be last on the second question. Hopefully, the candidates can pass these mics down. The only thing I'm going to ask to save time is that you stand instead of coming to the podium. If you would just stand up when you're speaking. We have 2 mics on both sides. At the end, after we're done with the questions and answers, each candidate will then have 1 minute for closing remarks. Our timekeeper here will keep visual clues so the candidates can look. She'll have those little warning tickets out there for 30 seconds. And when it's time, if you get towards the end, we ask you to finish your sentence, and then we'll go to the next question. Microphone etiquette, I'm sure we're going to hand that down, and everybody has done this before, so they will have a complete understanding of how to move these mics around. Respect for all candidates. We ask that audience refrain from clapping, cheering, making any noise during the responses. This encourages that we can hear every candidate's answer. Let's respect the process by giving all candidates their response a full attention. Now, the form, I have in my head that this is going to go from 7 o'clock to 8:30. However, depending on the volume of questions, I may extend the form slightly, but I promise you that we will end at 8:45 with questions before we start the closing remarks. We'll now begin with the opening remarks from each candidate, and we'll start now with Nancy.
Thank you, Steve. I'm Nancy Farnham, and I'm really happy to be here with you tonight, and I thank all of you for coming. It's a beautiful night outside. You could be doing other things, so thank you for taking time out to come. I want to tell you a little bit about myself. Service to others has always been something that's been really important to me. My professional career of over 40 years was in healthcare. I was serving the chronically ill and the elderly. I worked first as a nurse aide when I was in college, getting a degree in music therapy, later became a licensed social worker, and then I spent the last 27 years of my career as the administrator at Maryhill Manor in Enderlin, where I've lived with my family for the past 32 years. Volunteering's always been important to me too, and another way to serve others. So I'm active in my community, on many community boards, and on many church committees. I decided to run for office because I care about people, all people. And I was really frustrated by some of what I saw happening in the last legislative session. That session included many hate bills aimed at vulnerable people in our communities, particularly the LGBTQ community, and it also spent time on issues such as book bans that wasted resources and money. I'll bring compassion, common sense, and a strong work ethic to this office. I'm going to list out 4 issues that I see as a priority for the legislature. One is we need a strong public K-12 education program that values the staff and supports their work. Public dollars need to remain with public schools, and we need to provide free school meals for all students. 2, I believe everyone has the right to accessible health care and for the freedom to make their own deeply personal health care decisions without government interference. 3, I support programs that will help young families flourish, such as more support for childcare and maternity and paternity leaves. And 4th, I think we all should be able to live in North Dakota and be safe. If elected, I'll work on these issues, and I'd appreciate your support. Thank you.
That'll work. Okay. I am Shawn Olauson, a lifelong Democrat. My wife Christy and I live on a farm in Burns County where I grew up. Both of our adult children, Mindy and Shane, live in the area. Following in the footsteps of my dad and grandfather, I served on the Maple Valley School Board for 9 years. I've also served on the Cuba Township and Burns County Water Boards. At present, I am serving on the Burns County Commission. I've worked in Burns County my entire life and been employed by a local farmer and friend for the past 25 years. I'm running in large part because the current office holders have failed to listen to and respond to the concerns of the majority. Rather, they have voted in lockstep with culture war campaigns that are dictated by the far right. It is time to correct that. It is time for a change. One important issue that does concern local voters is the need to reform property taxes while keeping local control. I strongly support reforms to make the tax fair and equitable. But I do not support eliminating this tax because of the vital local services it supports. Another key issue is keeping public tax dollars for public education. I will vote against attempts to take dollars away from public education that serve everyone. Tax-supported vouchers for religious schools violate the separation of church and state doctrine this country was founded on. I also support free school lunches for all public school students. Children and teenagers do not learn on empty stomachs. As your legislator, I pledge to represent this district with dignity and deep respect for the law. I will be accountable. I will respond to your text, emails, and phone calls, and I will report to you by participating in legislative forums. And I will never turn my back on you.
Good evening. My name is Pete Gjovik. I'm a candidate for the District 24 Senate. I'm a son of immigrants, a farm kid, a career-long educator, and a business owner. I retired in 2020 as an emeritus professor at VCSU, and I was recently rehired. They dusted me off, and they've got me back as chair and director at the Don Mugen CTE Leadership Center. I received a couple national awards for my work at VCSU, and in 2016, Distinguished Technology Engineering Educator, and in 2019, the ACTE National Teacher Educator of the Year. For 13 years, my wife and I own some printing businesses, so I've got some business background too. I'm concerned about recent bills and attempts at bills by the North Dakota legislature, including an erosion of support for public schools. I also am concerned about the 20-plus bills that were introduced limiting the LGBTQ plus populations. My view is that we just need to treat all persons with equity, respect, value, and inclusion, and not turn our backs on these populations. I've had several brilliant and productive friends who moved out of North Dakota because they felt threatened and marginalized. I'll support programs to enhance young families, such as living wages, expand support for child care, and look for ways to create partnerships with stakeholders at schools, businesses, and church groups in rural communities to provide affordable daycare. I want to see expansion of programs to assist young families in purchases of homes. I have concerns about federal cuts that are coming up to domestic violence funding, so North Dakota is going to have to step up, as that's an issue that won't go away. I'm concerned about property taxes in North Dakota. We can't afford to gut the legacy fund at this time to carve out over $3 billion of income. But this next legislative session, the voters are going to be watching, and the next legislative group is going to have to attack the property tax issue and reform and give tax relief. Thank you.
Good evening, and I want to thank the League of Women Voters for putting this on, giving us another opportunity to be in front of you folks. My name is Mike Wobbema. I'm the current sitting senator for District 24. I've been there since 20, and so this is that time of the season where we're running for re-election, and here we are. I'm a lifelong North Dakota resident, with the exception of a few years here and there where the U.S. Air Force had me located in different locations around the country and around the world. I went into the Air Force out of high school and spent the next 35 and a half years wearing the Air Force uniform. Started out enlisted and then became an officer. During that time, I met my wife at the University of North Dakota, and as I explained to somebody in the parade the other day, it was love at first sight. She will disagree with me on that, but it was. And we have now 5 adult children with wonderful spouses, 4 daughters and a son, and 13 grandchildren. The oldest one being in his second year of college, and the second one working on becoming number 2. He's 2 years old, so no is his favorite word. I've lived a life of service. I retired in 2011 and did a couple other things and missed the service. And so got involved in the local politics and decided to run for office, and was fortunate enough for the citizens to select me and put me in place. We have a lot of work in front of us. We have a lot of issues to address, and I'm going to address those from the perspective of good conservative values, common sense, and a sense of working with those that sit to my left and my right, regardless of what aisle they are on, left or right aisle. I'm the chairman of the Workforce Development Committee for the Senate, and I'm also on the Education Committee. Both committees very important, and we have, as was alluded to, we have a lot of issues that we address, and we have a lot of issues coming up with the way things are right now. So I look forward to the questions and seeing what we have in front of us.
Well, thank you, Lisbon, for hosting this. My name is Dan Johnston. I live just north of Fort Ransom with my wife, Wendy, and we still have 5 children at home, hence the gray. So in saying that, I feel the very real problems in our society with inflation and property tax, and I do see a need to tackle property tax, but in my case, eliminate it. You might be wondering why Cole Christensen is not here tonight. Cole was I was your legislator from 2016 to 2020. Cole took over at that point and filled the seat I held. But Cole found love, and that led to marriage, and that led to moving out of state with his bride. So that's why I'm here. While I was your legislator, I was rated by the American Conservative Union, which is CPAC, as conservatively excellent. I think I probably had the highest rating ever from District 24, and that was a privilege. I'm NRA endorsed, I'm Farm Bureau endorsed, but I can tell you as a legislator, I had a pretty diverse record. I worked with all types of people, not one specific kind. So to give you a kind of a look into the type of legislator that I was, I'll read off some of the bills that I sponsored during those 4 years. I sponsored a bill that would replace the individual tax rate and bring it down to zero, which would have helped North Dakota families thrive. I worked to reform how law enforcement handles confidential informants. That bill became coined as Andrew's Law after Andrew Sadek. I believe the Wahpeton Police Department mishandled that young man's case. I sponsored numerous pro-Second Amendment bills. I fought against quick take eminent domain. I sponsored a bill to enhance local control of education. I worked to reduce state bureaucracy and bloat. I don't know if you know this, but in North Dakota, state agencies can sponsor their own bills, while you have to find a legislator. It's just an unfair process in my opinion, and it leads to unnecessary growth. For those seeking an alternative form of healing, I sponsored legislation which provided access to medical marijuana. I fought against unconstitutional civil asset forfeiture, which denies due process of law. I also fought against red flag laws, which also denies due process of law. I sought limitations on property tax assessments, which would have further helped North Dakota families. I sponsored a bill which requires informed consent for women seeking a chemical abortion, a true pro-choice bill. I worked to make adoption easier among families by broadening the definition of a relative, and I fought for food freedom, which continues to help rural families thrive. I also sponsored a bill to prevent minimum wage mandates, but thank you.
Can you hear me okay without the mic? It seems like it kind of echoes. Everybody here all right? Or do you want the mic? Pardon me? Okay. Okay, for those that don't know me, I'm Dwight Kiefert, I'm your first representative. And my wife Rob and I are lifelong residents of District 24. We've been married for 46 years and been involved in agriculture and agribusiness our entire life. Besides farming, we have been providing custom planting and harvesting for area farmers. We have 3 children and 7 grandchildren. After losing our son Matthew in a school bus accident in 1987, we became Christians and have been active in the ministry
first question, and we're going right to measure 4. The question reads as follows. Are you a supporter of Measure 4, which prohibits all political subdivisions from levying any tax on real property except for bonded indebtedness until paid? Either way, if it passes, how would you fix the shortfall after the legacy fund runs out? 1 minute for each candidate.
Well, I think you hit the ball on the head with your second part of the question, because if you cut your income, you have to cut your expenses. So we have to decide what we're going to cut out. You know, what we're going to cut out: human service, education, DOTs. Where are we going to cut? If you can't, you know, take away your income, you keep spending it as you are. Our Constitution doesn't allow us to go into debt. So that's a big question mark. How are you going to fix it? And couple that with term limits, where you'll have a whole new legislature with no experience trying to figure out what to do when there's no money. So it's kind of a double whammy there, and I'm very concerned about that.
Yeah, I support Measure 4, and the reason is this. 12 years ago, there was a measure to eliminate property tax, and the legislature said, we're going to do something about it, don't pass this. We're going to do something about this. 20 bills later, all failed. The legislature has done nothing, and so they will do nothing if this measure fails. What this bill seeks to do, it will provide 2024 level property taxes to cities and counties in perpetuity. Now, spending goes up 4% a year. Let's just expand on that and say 10% a year spending goes up. So counties and cities will be able to raise revenue, but they just can't do it on the assessed value of a property. So let's say spending goes up 10%. In 10 years, you're now paying what you currently are in property tax, not double. This is a win-win and an economic windfall for North Dakota, in my opinion.
I am in opposition to Measure 4. I think it's a bridge too far. I think it's important that we not take that off the table. But I'm also strongly in favor of significant property tax reform at the legislature. I wasn't in the legislature when we went around that flagpole last time. My take on my communication with my colleagues in the legislature now are that they're feeling the pressure of needing to do something. So I think that's where we need to go with that. If it were to pass, then the population has voted it in, and I will salute smartly and do whatever I can to roll my sleeves up to make it work. But this idea that when the legacy fund runs out is probably misguided, because as I understand it, the only money that can be used to offset the property taxes are general funds, of which there's about $6.1 billion in the state budget to do that, and $3.15 billion of it is a property tax offset. Legacy funds, by Constitution, won't be able to be used to offset the legacy or the property tax mandate. So there's no fear of the legacy fund being used and running out. The question will be how much of the income of the legacy fund per biennium we tap into to solve this problem. So the legacy fund will continue to grow, and legacy means generational to me, and we can't touch that. That needs to be available for our children and grandchildren down the road.
I recently saw an article headline from somebody down in the Bismarck area that referred to the Measure 4 as basically the effect of using a sledgehammer when a scalpel will do. And I am very concerned about that. I don't support that concept at this point of wholesale cutting back on property taxes, because quite frankly, I think we all enjoy having our roads open in the wintertime. We enjoy having new gravel on our roads in the summer. There's so many different areas that heavily rely on that income that we just can't. it would be very difficult if it happens. But if it does go in place, one of the things I've been wondering about is we have extraction fund, and a few years back it was cut rather by a few percent, and we have extraction industries that are making record profits. Maybe that's one place we would have to go to possibly increase that extraction fund percentage a little bit to increase that income. And other than that, it's going to have to be some very tight cuts in evaluations of where different areas are across the state.
I'm against Measure 4. As a county commissioner, it would be locked in at what we collect this year into the future. There is no adjustments without going back to a vote of the people to raise it in the future. For 13 counties in the state, it probably wouldn't be a problem because they are home rule and can raise funds other way. The rest of us that are not home rule cannot increase our revenues. There's one example I use as a township officer. When I got on the township board, we paid $7.50 a yard for gravel. 10 years later, now we're paying $15.50 for gravel. In another 10 years, if we're locked in at this year's rate, which would mean we'd only be graveling probably 2 miles a year, 3 miles a year with the money that we would collect. So it's breaking it down to its simplest form, but property tax in the state needs to be reformed. I agree with that.
I'm against Measure 4. I think we need property taxes. It funds so many important things, including our schools. Our school in Enderlin, about 30% of their budget is from property tax, and I think Fort Ransom is 50%. And there's no plan at all to replace that money. So whoever goes into the legislature is going to have to address that right off the bat. Where does that $1.5 billion come from? And that's going to be a big problem to solve. So I do not support that, but I am definitely for reforming property taxes. I think we can have some discussions, find some ways to make them more fair and equitable. And last session there was that $500 rebate. That was a good start. I think we can keep working and to make some changes that way.
Dan, we'll start with you on this one. This question reads, I work part-time of my day at a nursing home. We have had a labor shortage for decades. Now, over half of the workers are immigrants. What are we willing to do to make immigrants feel welcome and needed in our state and our community so we can have workers to care for our loved ones?
I just feel like it needs more attention than it's gotten. Going back to the property tax question, you say, where's the money going to come from? It takes about $1 billion to replace property tax. Our state currently overspends by at least $2 billion every year. We spend over double what our neighbors to the south and South Dakota spend, and same size state, similar population. So the money's there. I mean, what is there existing right now is the pork. I mean, $750 billion in pork and corporate welfare, $81 million in unneeded property tax credits, $115 in Operation Prairie Dog, $200 million in legacy fund earnings. The money's there. Don't believe the scare tactics when they tell you that we're going to have to raise revenue or something like that. And the fact is, cities and counties will still be able to raise revenue. This doesn't prevent that. The mills that are currently in place by the state prevent that. This actually opens up true local control. So I'd encourage you to read the measure, look into it before you make an assumption. Don't believe the fear mongering. Thank you.
immigrants filling the labor shortage? How do we make these immigrants in their nursing home feel welcome and get more of them?
Okay, you've done this twice now. You've asked us 2 questions and given us 1 minute to answer 2 questions. So,
No, that was the question. It's just Dan went back to property tax.
No, I understand. I just want to say if you ask us a couple of questions, we need probably 2 minutes to be able to answer them. So I just.
So the question is, what are you willing to do to make immigrants feel welcome and needed in our state so we have workers to take care of our loved ones in our nursing homes?
And the first part of that was we don't have enough workers in the state.
Yep.
That's the first question, really, because that's the ultimate question is we don't have sufficient workforce in the state with the current population we have. And as the chair of workforce development, that's a question we fielded a lot in the last session, trying to figure out how to do that. The problem is we don't know where everybody went. Once we went into COVID, we didn't have the employment problem beforehand, and when we came out of COVID, suddenly nobody can find people to work for them. So that's just a problem we have to try to figure out. We're trying to reduce red tape and provide opportunities for people to gain the skills necessary to get into in this case, the healthcare business, to help solve that. As far as immigrants, I actually was knocking on doors in Lisbon earlier and actually met a couple of those immigrants who were just ecstatic. They were ecstatic to be here. They've been here for 3 years now. They've been working at the hospital, and they are looking forward to becoming citizens. And so that tells me that they feel welcome. I've not been privy to, it's not an arena that I'm in, but I've not been privy to people feeling unwelcome when they come to help us in the healthcare community. I think we've gotten a lot of help along those lines, and I think they feel received, and I think they feel welcomed. But if I'm wrong there, it's because I'm not in that environment, and I don't know that. So I can only go by what I experience as I talk to people or experience in my own, when I'm taking care of my own health care. So I think North Dakota welcomes people to come in from all races, colors, creeds, and all that, and I think we just treat people with the respect they deserve, and that's the answer to that question, in my opinion. I'm not sure where I am on time. Can I keep talking?
You have 30 seconds.
I have
I gave you 2 minutes.
You gave me 2 minutes. Well, I'm going to give back 30 seconds.
Part of the difficulty is if we're dealing with immigrants, is getting them from the borders and getting them here. And one of the big problems, and Nancy brought this up in a presentation that she did a while back, about the need for immigration judges to expedite the process so we can get more immigrants here and this sort of thing. But the state of North Dakota needs to work with federal immigration to try to enhance getting them here. As far as training and this sort of thing, I had a master's student of mine that trained CNAs in an online program. And it really did some great work here in North Dakota and can help get more CNAs trained from whatever their background is, whether they're local, whether they're immigrants. A big part of what we need to do is just be a welcoming society. I'm a son of immigrants. It's in my I guess it's in my DNA, and we need to do everything we can to enhance new workers wherever they come from and work with them explicitly to help them become very productive in our local communities.
If they're willing to put up with the winters, I say we welcome them wholeheartedly. Training is a big issue. Making sure they get the correct training. Making sure they get the education they need once they get here so they can communicate. But like I said, welcoming them into our communities. We're all immigrants at one time in this state, so we just got to make everybody feel wanted and welcome here.
First, to answer about just a comment on the workforce. In the 80s, sometime in the 80s, I remember going to a workshop and they said, we're going to have a severe workforce shortage coming up not too far away because all these boomers are going to retire. And that's exactly what's happening now. It's a numbers game. We have more people leaving the workforce than coming in. And as far as welcoming immigrants, I think one thing we need to do is challenge some of the false ideas that are out there. For instance, immigrants are called illegal immigrants when they come to our border, and yet a lot of them are asylum seekers, and it's a legal process to enter a country and seek asylum. And having people say that immigrants are eating our cats and dogs, and those kind of comments do not go well at making it a welcoming society for people. We do have a North Dakota Department of Legal Immigration, just was started the last legislative session. I think that's a wonderful step. They're trying to work at smoothing out the process, making it go faster. But I talked to a nursing home administrator the other day, 2 of them, and they said it's 3 to 4 years. They've already been waiting a year or 2. It's 3 to 4 more years before they'll get someone to come in to work in the nursing home as a nurse. And there's just so much. I've been to the border. There's so many misconceptions. It's often said that immigrants don't pay taxes. You can look at many sources. On the average, they'll say somewhere between 90 to 140 billion a year is paid into taxes, supports our Social Security and Medicare system by immigrants that are here. So I think we do need to work at how we speak about immigrants, and that would, and then look at ways to be sure to make them feel welcome.
Start this year on the next one. And we got another 2-part question. Okay. So here we go. I didn't write them. So here we go. What is your position on school vouchers that allocate public funds to private schools and homeschools? Do you believe such vouchers are beneficial to all students? Rural, special education, free and reduced lunches, EL, tribal in North Dakota. So once again, it's a 2-part question. We believe in vouchers, private school and homeschool, and we believe it's beneficial to all students.
I'm not sure if vouchers is necessarily the right solution for me, but I do believe, I take a little bit different take on a comment made earlier about public dollars for public schools. These are taxpayer dollars. Those are your dollars, your kids. You pay taxes. You are in charge as parents of your children. So I take the view of it's taxpayer dollars to pay for taxpayers' children to get an education. So if that whatever that means, it doesn't mean necessarily that all $11,000 plus per student per year that goes to the public school follows the student, because I think there's some fixed costs there to maintain the public school system that we have, but perhaps a portion of it, 30%, 40%, I'm not sure. And I'm not sure if that's necessarily a voucher or how that would manifest itself. The devil's in the details, and there's lots of layers to this onion, and I'm not really sure how that would flesh out. But I do think that It's taxpayers' money, and the taxpayers ought to be able to use it to pay for their kids' education in some form or fashion. So that's the voucher piece. To that then, I believe that ultimately it does benefit all students, because competition, what does competition do in the world? It creates better competition across the board. So if you have schools that come up that are started that are private schools, it would compel and force the public school system to get better at what they do. Each parent knows what's best for their children, in what environment works best for them, where they thrive the best in their education, whether it be in a private school setting or a public school setting. So I think overall that there's an improvement that can be made. Is there going to be some bumps along the road? Yes. North Dakota is a very affluent state. Is North Dakota going to let the public school system flounder because everybody suddenly bails out? No, that's not going to happen. Oh, by the way, there aren't that many public or private schools in the state of North Dakota for that to happen, especially in the rural communities. More of the urban communities is where it's going to be impacted. So I think there's room for both, and I think we can get there if we are diligent and we're careful and we make sure that we have everybody coming to the table for the discussion when it happens.
I do not support vouchers for going to private schools, and the part of the reason is the North Dakota Century Code, Section 1, Article 8. I'll read the back part of it here. Basically, the first part talks about intelligence, patriotism, the type of things that they want to impart on their children. But it says that the Legislative Assembly shall make provision for the establishment and maintenance of a system of public schools which shall be open to all children of the state of North Dakota and free from sectarian control. This legislative requirement shall be irrevocable without the consent of the United States and the people of North Dakota. So I think as the Century Code stands right now, there's an issue with using public funds in a voucher system for private schools. I frankly believe in the concept of separation of church and state, and that gets into the sectarian question. And I understand Senator Wobbema's concerned, and I understand the voters concerned that are taxpayers say, hey, I'm paying into this, but there's lots of things that we pay into that we don't necessarily get benefit from. I've never had to make a call to EMS. I've never had to call in the sheriff's department. But I sure am glad that I'm helping pay for those type of things, and they're there and they're available when I need them. So at this point, I would say no on the vouchers based on the North Dakota Century Code.
Well, second what Pete said. Any attempt to use public dollars for private and religious schools would require a vote of the people. It is in our Constitution. This is a big deal. Public money for religious schools is unconstitutional.
Yes, I'm against private school vouchers or giving any of that money from the public school funds to private schools. I think public dollars need to stay with public schools. One of the things about our public schools is they are for all children. Private schools can say, no, we're not going to take care of this special needs child, or we're not going to provide for that child or that child. You don't meet our criteria. Public schools take every child and they give them a good education. And then I think about for every student who goes to a private school, that'd be a loss of somewhere around $10,000 to the public school budget. You take 6 to 8 students away, that could be a full-time teacher's salary. And then what do you do when there's already a teacher shortage and we're struggling to find those professionals for our students? And then another thing is private schools don't meet the same requirements that public schools do. The voting records of my opponents here from North Dakota United are really dismal when it comes to support for private or for public schools. Senator Wobbema was ranked at 29%, Representative Kiefert at 37%, and Johnston in 2017 at 5%, and 2019 at 13%. So I think that we need to look at that. We need our public schools. You look at the rural communities. When a rural community loses their public school, they lose so much. That public school is the center of that community and is a vital part of that community. So we need to work to support them and provide them with adequate funds to do that.
I tend to support vouchers among public school students. Why should a student be stuck in a failing school? For instance, I am a homeschooling dad, and this might surprise you. I do take the position of the North Dakota Homeschool Association, and that is they are officially against vouchers. And the reason they're against vouchers it's a mindset of with the shekels come the shackles. Many of these parents and grandparents now felt the sting of the state. Back in the 80s, it was illegal to homeschool. And so they really just want to be left alone. And any bill that comes out with vouchers, you'll notice, and I would caution the private schools as well, there will be a lot of restrictions and a lot of controls placed on them from the state. I do think vouchers is a good thing, though, and it gives parents more control. And I do support the public school system. I pay my property taxes.
This question sounds like something that we have around the kitchen table on a Saturday morning over a cup of coffee. And we'll start with Pete. Is there any talk of a state-owned insurance company for property and auto? Rates are through the roof, even with no claims. How do you as a candidate feel about a bipartisan board to set that up?
Well, gee, we already have a Bank of North Dakota, and we have a state mill and elevator. Maybe we need to look at that too. I think the concept of a bipartisan group brought together to try to come up with methods or purchasing ability to drive rates down and get preferred rates would be a wonderful idea, and certainly something that would be worth looking into. So I would support that concept, it's something that if we could do that, maybe we can become a model for other states too, be a leader.
If it was done on a bipartisan basis, yes, I would support it. I mean, like Pete said, we have a state mill, an elevator, we own our state bank. And driving prices down that way seems like a reasonable thing to do.
It's the first time this idea has ever popped up for me, so a new thing to ponder, and I would need to do some research on it, and I guess that's one of the things I would tell you, that as a legislator, I would research items that come to me, especially something that's new to me and that I don't have much experience or knowledge about. So that would be my approach as a legislator. But the thing I really like that's appealing to me is it says a bipartisan committee, and that's one of the things in our legislature right now, that it's so heavily Republican that we don't have that equal exchange of ideas. I think the more we can have that balance in our legislature, the more that we'll come up with good ideas and good solutions for all of North Dakota.
I guess this is a new concept, I haven't heard of this before, but I think about government getting bigger. Do you really think they can do it cheaper than what's going on now? I mean, they have to start another agency with a full lineup of agents or whatever. I just don't know if they can do it any cheaper than free enterprise can. I'd be real skeptical about that.
Yeah, I suppose I would echo Dwight's sentiments. I think Ronald Reagan had some good quips about the government coming to help you out, right? I just think of the Affordable Care Act. You can keep your doctor, right? I've had friends before that happened. They had individual insurance for themselves, and it went from $150 a month to $600 a month. So I would really be concerned about creating yet another government entity to fix a problem.
Well, this is a new one for me as well. I think the struggle would be if you created a statewide insurance company for home and auto, would it be limited to that being the only insurance company you could have in the state? Or would they be subject to the competitiveness of the economy of other insurance companies? And I think once you start doing that comparison, you'd find that the rates at the state level, especially with such a small population base of North Dakota compared to, and those people that would participate in the insurance program, compared to other insurance companies, I would think that you would find that their insurance rates would be pretty high pretty quickly because of the amount of costs that they would have to cover and the funds they would have to hold back. So I think it would be difficult, and I would not support it if it came to the legislature at this point, because I think it stretches into that socialism mindset that we are afraid of. You know, we talked about the Bank of North Dakota, we talked about the mill, but they have competition. They're not solely the only entity doing those things. So I'd say no.
Thank you. We'll start with Shawn on this question. What is your plan to head off another potential colossal lawsuit to force North Dakota to address its grossly inadequate mental health care system?
So 7 years ago, the supermajority spent a lot of money on the Schulte study. They were told at that time North Dakota was at crisis, told possible lawsuits to come. They did nothing. They commissioned another study. The mental health in this state needs more mental health professionals, doctors, psychiatrists, the like. They need to put dollars behind the problem instead of kicking the can down the road, blaming someone else. The supermajority has had years to do something and has done nothing.
I just read the most recent 2023 Schulte study, and it said just that we have sat and studied, and it is time to act. We really need to do something about mental health, and there has been some progress, but not nearly enough. Not nearly enough. So we need to be looking at what kind of services we can provide and what kind of models will work. I've talked a few times to Carlotta McCleary, who's the Director of Mental Health America of North Dakota. She talked about taking the 8 human service centers in North Dakota and upgrading them to meet the Certified Behavioral Health certification process, community behavioral health clinics. And that would provide a lot of services to everyone across the state of North Dakota. And then also she made a comment that we did better in the 90s than now as far as the number of people we were serving for mental health, that it just dropped off, especially for children. And if we can't find the professionals because there is a workforce shortage, let's look at other programs. She talked about programs that used to be where there was more peer support, and you would train in different people to surround those people that are at risk and help them that way. So there's other ways we can approach this.
I'd have to say, I think our nation has dropped the ball on mental illness treatment 20 years ago. We had a hospital in Maintown that once had 2,500 beds. Now there's only 100. Where'd everybody go? I mean, what did they expect to happen when they just let people run that were once under mental health care? So it's almost like somebody decided it's cheaper to build a prison than lock them out there and doing a treatment. Because that's what they did in Jamestown. They got 100 beds there for the mental hospital, the rest of it's a prison. So some of the same people that were once in the state hospital are probably now in prison because they got in trouble once they got out. So it's a national problem. It's just not North Dakota. They've dropped the ball, like I say, 20 years ago with the homestead decision. And I don't know, it's gotten so bad, I don't know if we can afford to even address it anymore. But we had a good plan at one time, and they dropped the ball, and now we are either gonna have to provide help or deal with the consequences.
This is a question similar that we had in Valley City. I would say that as a country, as a state, we're probably the most medicated nation in the world. And if you look at just about any mass shooter that's walked into a school or a theater, all of them have one thing in common. They are on pharmaceutical drugs, every single one of them. So I think we need to start looking at the root cause of mental illness. I agree with RFK Jr. on this. It's systemic, and it's something that needs to be addressed. As far as workforce shortages, going back to 2020, we treated our healthcare professionals as heroes, and then we proceeded to villainize them because they wouldn't put an experimental substance in their body. And the same thing with children. Mental illness has been on the rise there. We did the same thing with them. We masked them, we kept them away from their school and their friends, and that has had bad results.
No, there's no question that there's a mental health crisis in this country, but the idea that there are not enough mental health providers in the state is symptomatic of every other state in the union. There's not enough mental health providers in this country for the workload that's there, and so we have to figure out another way of addressing it. And I think we got to get back to our spiritual roots. We got to get back to the family. We got to get back to taking care of each other. And I'm not sure how we can take that step back in time and reestablish the family as the root structure of this country. But that's where, to me, the problem ultimately lies, is coming back to faith, coming back to family and taking care of each other. But our human services budget is the largest budget in the state of North Dakota, and it's still not enough to solve all of the human services and health issues that we have. So it's there's a lot of layers to this onion to try to resolve. And we just have to keep working at it, one layer at a time.
I think anything we can do to explore programs to bring more mental health professionals into the fold would be well worth the investigation and programs to try to do that. Mr. Kiefert brought up the concept, we had the state hospital with 2,500 beds. I mean, that was back before the Depression era. There was that many beds, and now we're down to, what was it, 100 or about 100. So that's terribly inadequate. But I'm not sure about the condition of the state hospital, if it's a cost issue with trying to expand it again. I kind of would like to maybe possibly see the concept of the regional centers possibly to expand some mental health care.
As a retired school superintendent and now as a starting rancher, I didn't ask this question, but here it is, and it goes to Nancy. Several ranchers have started processing their own beef. How would you support their efforts to establish local meat lockers?
Well, that's a new one for me to think about too. I think it would be just a matter of establishing the guidelines for what needs to be done for that processing to make it healthy and safe for all who eat that meat. So whatever regulations would be needed for cleanliness and for packaging, and what would need to be on the labels, all that sort of thing would need to be clarified, and then support them in what they're doing.
Yeah, help develop local processing. I'm just imagining what they're getting at. Our markets are mainly controlled by 4 of the largest processors across the nation. When I haul a load of cows to Aberdeen, they usually end up in 4 different places. I can tell you the buyers. So what they're saying here is, how can you help? Nancy here has a locker over in Enderlin. I gotta get a reservation a year in advance just to haul a steer there, because he's that busy.
We did talk to Farm Bureau about even establishing a state-owned slaughter plant. They weren't really in favor of that. So as far as helping develop the local slaughterhouses, we buy our beef, and we've gotten it from our hogs we get from Enderlin, but our beef we get from out by Medina. But I don't know, it's kind of like a supply and demand. If they have enough demand, they're going to expand. I don't know if you necessarily have to encourage them to do that if the market is there. So, but we sure enjoy getting fresh meat when we get it from a local producer, processed locally and whatnot. It's a whole different thing than when you buy at Walmart. A whole different color and everything. So you just have to encourage people to support your local producers, your local slaughter plants, and I think it'll take off on its own, just supply and demand.
If you asked, should the state set up and run that slaughterhouse or the meat locker, I would say no. But if we could help local entities set that up for themselves, sure, why not? You're getting local beef, you're not getting foreign beef, which is, if you go to Walmart, probably what you're getting now. I know some of you asked the question in here about, and I haven't heard it read yet, should men participate in women's sports? And I'm going to tell you unequivocally, we need to protect our daughters. No, they should not be allowed to. Thank you.
I think it was the last session that we had a local meat producer in the western part of the state establish his own slaughterhouse. But before he could do that, he had to jump through all these federal hoops about meat inspection. That was the problem. The problem is the red tape and the restrictions and the rules and regulations we levy on people to do that. He ended up actually bringing in a federal inspector to stay at his place. But before he could even do that, he had to make sure he had a market for his beef so that it would pay for the work that he needed done. So there's a market aspect of this, there's a competition aspect of this, but there's also the red tape and the regulatory burden that's an aspect of this. And at the state level, it's that regulatory burden that we can help ease, but the rest of it really boils down to how well you can market your beef, how well you can make your beef better than the next guy's beef, or whatever you're trying to do. It's a supply and demand and a competition in the marketplace. And so you got to separate yourself. There's your economics lesson for the day. Thank you.
It's an interesting question. You know, the issue, of course, as Mike brought up, was, you know, the federal regulations, this type of thing. And I'm kind of having flashbacks to the old National Farmers Organization from way back in the old days, you know, trying to find ways to take the middleman out of the process and get more income for the producer versus middle processing. Certainly could be worth exploring. Maybe the state could help in getting some things set up with it. Anything that we could do to possibly help farmers and smaller communities and bring in more sustainable agricultural types, I think we need to explore it.
I know there's in many states mobile slaughterhouses that go from farm to farm, and it all depends on the regulations. It's been talked about the federal regulation. That's there for a reason, to make sure it's a safe product for us to eat. With these mobile outfits, I know if they're slaughtering cattle for their own use, or people own the cattle through a farmer, they can slaughter them at these mobile stations without having to have all the federal regulation. But yes, I agree, having more local meat processing would be a better thing than to rely on the big chains for it.
Next question, we'll start with you, Dwight. Measure 2 is a constitutional amendment placed on the ballot by the legislature that would prohibit people who aren't North Dakotan residents from collecting petition signatures for initiated measures. It would limit measures to a single subject. It would raise the signature requirement from 4% to 5% of the state's population and require those proposals to be approved through 2 statewide votes, once on the June primary ballot and again on the November general election ballot. Do you support or oppose Measure 2, and why?
I have to say I support it because I think decisions for North Dakota should be made here. Why do we want some other state deciding what they want done in our state? And spending a lot of money, hiring people that aren't on with signatures. Sometimes they're not even truthful about what they're doing. I mean, let's keep it in North Dakota. We can run our own state. We don't need Florida or somebody else, you know, passing measures. What if they want to get rid of all our cattle? Then they can come in here and start a measure to get rid of all the beef, you know? So I think we should just make our decisions in North Dakota and keep other states out of it.
I oppose Measure 2, I think that it takes power away from the people. The measure process is the recourse for the people of North Dakota when they want to change something that the legislature won't do. So I think this measure takes that power away from them. Just a real quick thing. Earlier I heard, banned books mentioned in libraries. I gotta say, pornographic material should not be available for children in our public libraries. And for that matter, when a parent takes their child to the library, they shouldn't have to worry about walking past a computer where an adult is viewing a pornographic material. You might say that's a First Amendment issue, but I would say to you, in certain cases, our constitutional rights are curbed. For instance, when I go to the Capitol building, I'm not allowed to carry my firearm. So my Second Amendment rights are curbed in that situation. Thank you.
I'm undecided on Measure 2, but I do think that we do have to make it a little. We have to narrow the lane, the left and right lane on initiated measures in the first place. 50% of the population plus one vote to change our Constitution in the state. The fundamental document that drives what we do in the state is too low a bar. We have to have 2/3 of a vote in the legislature to put an initiated measure out there. But the citizens can pass or can change the Constitution at 50% plus one vote. To me, it should be about a 2/3 thing. So I think we need to strengthen that and make that more stringent. As far as who collects signatures, sometimes we get too far down in the weeds on some things. But I think we have to make it a little more difficult to pass initiated measures to ensure that we're doing the right things and that when we make constitutional changes, they're substantive and they are foundational in our state's document.
I'm a little ambivalent on this one also. The one thing that I have noticed, though, is that the legislature in recent years has kind of shown a tendency not to move very quickly on some of the initiated measures that are put up by the people. So I don't, once I know more about it, I would not support limiting the voters' opportunity to create initiated measures. I think that's an important part of what we're doing, and I think Measure 4 is a good example of it. Even though I don't necessarily agree with the wholesale cuts on the property tax, that's a shot across the bow for the legislature. And the voters are telling them, hey, we need some tax relief, we need some re-looking at how we levy taxes on property taxes in the state. So I think that we have to make sure we ensure that initiated process is still there and not being hindered.
I'm against Measure 2. Our Constitution's been around for over 100 years, and I think they did a pretty good job putting it together when they did, and the rules that they made. So leaving it alone to me would be the answer. An answer to one of the thoughts about moving it to 2/3, well, you can do an initiated measure and see if that passes.
There are some different things to think about with Measure 2, but I would say where I'm standing right now is that I would oppose the measure. When I look at it and try to get at the base of it, North Dakota's had a proud history of direct democracy, giving residents of the state a chance to make changes when they feel the legislature's not been responsive. And I think this Measure 2 would interfere with that. And I think that's very important. We need to keep that ability for our residents of our state. So I would oppose Measure 2.
Start with Dan on this question. School infrastructure is inadequate in several reduce the services that public schools can provide. Are you an advocate for increasing funding to public schools to address these problems?
Oh, absolutely. As we've heard earlier, the state has a constitutional obligation to fund public education, yet the state doesn't do that. They offset the cost of education, public education, by sending it to the locals. I think right now it's at 80% is what the state funds. The state needs to fund it 100%. That would help out big time, in my opinion.
There's no question that we have some old schools in North Dakota. And I think what that forces the school district to do, we also have, what forces them to do is to think critically and think outside the box on how they find solutions. The state right now picks up 70% of the tab of school funding. The rest of it is done at the local property tax level. I think when it comes to dealing with infrastructure and the cost of schools, I not really want to go here, but there may be time when it's consolidation needs to take place in some schools, and I know that consolidation or the school moving out of the town is the death knell of the town typically. But when you have these exorbitant costs, how do you deal with that? I think certainly we have good advocates in the legislature for schools, and we can dig into what we would need to do that's all right, what we can do to help address the infrastructure problems of schools. But schools try to make the adjustment by putting bond referendums out there, and they're unsuccessful. And so if the local people are not willing to fund on the current bond referendum, where do you go from there? So it's another one of those difficult situations, I guess.
One of the issues that we've been running into is this actually gets into the building, school building issues that are going on. There are several schools in the state, like Valley City is one, Oaks is one, Devils Lake and others, that are really struggling with not having the property tax base, and they're not going to be able to get those bond issues through to build or remodel or do whatever they want, whatever they need to do to make a better learning situation or environment for their students. This again is one of those things. Are there ways that we could leverage this, the Bank of North Dakota to give some preferred lending, or is there a possibility of making use of legacy fund to start coming up with some of these programs to help? The other issue that I really struggle with is when we do too much of the consolidation, some of these really young kids are on the bus an awful long time all day. And I was one of those kids in the early days, and I was the first one on in the morning, the last one on at night, because my bus driver lived right next to me. And it was brutal.
Steve, could you read that question again?
School infrastructure is inadequate in several rural North Dakota communities, and inflation has reduced the services that public schools can provide. Are you an advocate for increasing funding to public schools to address these issues, problems?
Yes and no. We have to look at the size of schools, I realize that. But the important thing is to make sure that we have the education facilities for our students, our population. So if that means increasing or creating a new fund to maybe help with some of these school districts to provide the money, I'm guessing I would be for it.
Yes, I would definitely support our schools and public education by advocating for the funds that they're needed. I think when we look at a state and how we use our money, that when we look at the needs of our children, that's a great need. That's speaking to our future. So absolutely, I would support the schools in any way I can. And as far as the buildings, I think there's 16 or 20 in the state. Pete named some of them that they're really struggling with their buildings. And I think the idea of using the legacy fund for that one-time cost makes sense. It's not going to be an ongoing cost, but just help with that building need, whether it's remodeling or a new building, depending on what the citizens of that area determine to do in their voting process.
I guess I'm all for supporting our local schools, but this is one of those issues that'll have to be taken up in that session by the education committee. Like, I'm on agriculture and human services, and that's what I work with. So during the next session, the education committee will get the problem, they'll have all the testimony of what the answers and what their choices, what they can do are. That's just something that they're gonna have to work out during the session. You know, bill that we can do by ourselves, we can support it, but they have to come up with the answer. But they hear the testimony, they talk to the people, they see what the problem is. That's one thing I don't like about the legislature, there's too much happening in that. You know, I'm in human services and agriculture all week. I don't get to see what's happening in education. I mean, they're the ones that hear all the testimony, they hear all the problems and solutions and all the avenues they can take. But we really don't get to see it until they have a final, bill presented. So this is something we're gonna have to take up the next session, by the proper channel.
I'm looking at the time. I think we got time for 3 more questions, and then we'll do the closing remarks. Here's number 9. We'll start with Mike. What is your stance on red flag laws and military-style assault rifles?
Two questions again. Yeah, I guess so. That's all right. Let me go back to the last question, though. It was on the tip of my tongue, and I couldn't think of it until I sat down and my time expired. There is a fund called this SCALF fund, S-C-A-L-F. It's a School Construction Assistance Loan Fund. It's a rotating fund that has been funded by the state, where its use is for school loan construction at low interest rates, and we put it's at about $360 million balance now, and we put a little more money in there, like $50 million or something last biennium. And my goal would be that we keep continuing to plus that fund up, and its proceeds, as the school bonds are paid back into that SCALF fund, it goes right back into that fund, and that fund continues to grow as the schools that borrow money for it. And so the problem is there's so much of a need out there that the money is immediately gone. But we did kind of sort of divided it up that larger schools, smaller schools have some equal access to it. But everybody's got a thing. Red flag laws. Red flag laws violate all due process. We are saying somebody might commit a crime. Well, that's like saying I might fall down the stairs on my way out the door. No, the red flag laws are unconstitutional in my mind, and so no, we can't do that. As far as military-style assault rifles, somebody's got to define that for me. They're semi-automatic rifles. That's what they are. I use a semi-automatic 7mm to hunt deer with. So there is no difference in that. We're talking again a fear factor. It was brought up earlier about don't listen to the fear factor. It's a fear factor. And weapons, guns, not to get too cliche, but guns don't kill people, people kill people. It gets back to our spiritual roots and our family again, and taking care of each other. And when people have difficulty, that we come alongside them and help them. And so we got to quit trying to scare each other by coming up with the next big thing to outdo each other on the scare factor thing. It's they're just semi-automatic rifles, and so you can make them look any way you want, but that's just the way they are. So no issue there.
I guess I'm at the point, I just hope that somewhere, sometime, that we can get some common sense, bipartisan work and find some work or find some point in the middle that we can come up with a solution. It is a fact that states that do have stronger gun laws see less gun violence, and it doesn't mean that they're totally shutting down people from having guns. I mean, I own guns myself. But we just need to get some common sense going, and we need to work from both sides of the aisle and need to find some solutions. It seems to me that there's times it's harder to get a driver's license and drive a car than it is to get access to guns, especially, we'll use the term assault-type weapons, flat shooting, high caliber, high speed. I don't have don't have an answer. I just want to see that both sides work together and try to carve something out and make this thing work, because there's too many kids getting killed right now, and it shouldn't be happening. I have one of the things that is proposed or has been proposed at times is that we should arm teachers in schools to protect our kids, and that would be a bit of a problem from my experience talking to teacher candidates that I've worked with. We would lose a lot of teachers that would just quit teaching in that situation. So I'm kind of spun off a little bit here, but again, common sense, let's get some bipartisan things going and try to fix it.
Common sense is the main thing, yeah. If the red flag laws aren't a problem and people have not a problem with assault weapons, then those of us that think we do have a problem, we need more protection out there. More resource officers in schools to protect our children, metal detectors probably. I don't have the answers. But like Pete said, there's way too many kids getting shot. And we need to address the problem now, not in the future.
The statistics on guns are pretty staggering. Firearms are the leading cause of death for American children and teens. So I definitely think it's time to make some changes with our gun laws. And I'm not against guns. My dad was a big hunter. My son's a big hunter. My grandpa, we even have a story about he stopped as he was bringing the midwife to their farmhouse to deliver my mom. She was being born. He stopped to shoot pheasants before he got the midwife to the home. So it's not that, but it is time to make some changes. Red flag laws, I think that's a way of helping people, taking care of people, looking out for your neighbor. If you know someone is mentally unstable and they have guns and they're threatening to do harm to themselves or others, that is a good law. That is a really good law, and I would support it. And outlawing the military mass destruction sort of weapons seems to make sense too. I think that would be something we should do. Looking at things like securing firearm storage, requiring secure firearm storage, or responsible ownership, background checks, those kind of things are needed. When we talk about guns and the violence that goes with it, one of the things people don't talk about is suicide. The number of suicides by guns is high. 6 out of 10 gun deaths in the United States are suicides. So, and in rural North Dakota, that's a big concern. North Dakota's rate of gun suicide is up 46% from 2012 to 2021. That's huge. So yes, it's definitely time to get active and make some common sense gun laws that we can all agree upon.
Red flag laws, I mean, the problem with that is who gets to be the judge? I mean, who here is normal? Can anybody give me a definition of normal? There is not. There's no definition of normal in this country anymore. So the problem is you've got kids that are mentally ill, killing people they don't even know for no reason. And I'm glad to see they're trying to charge the parents. But if you're the parent of a kid that's diagnosed mentally ill, you don't take them to the gun range, you buy them a gun. I mean, how stupid is that? But that's what's happening. But now these are trying to charge these parents that are doing this with these kids. I mean, it's not the assault weapon, I mean, it's the people. And almost every one of these school shootings are diagnosed mentally ill, and mom buys them a gun, takes them to the gun range. Why didn't she take them camping? Why don't you go to the zoo? You know, take them to the gun range, teach them how to shoot. Well, that one shooter, he shot his mom first, before he went to the school. Sandy Hook, I believe. But it's a mental illness problem, it's not a gun problem. And the problem with the red flag law is if you have a spouse or child that's passed away, and you get grief counseling, you could be labeled mentally ill. And you wouldn't be able to have a gun anymore. Well, that's a real deterrent for people getting help. Well, we don't want to take a chance getting help if they're going to say I'm crazy and I can't have a gun. You know, can't go hunting no more, can't do anything, target shooting. But assault weapons, I mean, that's not the problem. The problem is we're not dealing with the mental illness problem. And like I mentioned earlier, I had 2,500 people in Jamestown. They had a great 8 dairy farm down there. They had people living there, getting their meds, getting their meals, getting taken care of. They were being productive. They were selling milk. Everybody that had anything to do with that hospital just had nothing but good to say for it. And you did have bad ones out there too. But Jamestown was something that they could have been proud of. And now, like I said, 100. You have somebody that needs mental health, the ambulance takes them to Jamestown, they wouldn't even take them. You've got a guy in the jail in Farnham, they moved him now, but their answer was to give the jail a straight jacket to put the guy in. That was their mental health they were going to deal with him. But what's happening is that the state level is dropping the responsibility on the local cities. And they're not prepared for it. There's no funding, there's no plan. Just here you go, you figure it out. And that's how we're dealing with it. Sorry.
You're in the principal's office like 5 times over now. You know, as a former service member and as a former legislator, I know when you go into the legislature, you hold up your hand and you take an oath to defend the Constitution. Red flag laws are a direct affront to that oath. I think you'd be in violation of your oath if you supported red flag legislation. It denies due process of law. It's a clear violation. As far as assault weapons go, you know, I assume we're talking about the scary AR-15 or something like that. You know, that was invented I think in the late 50s for the civilian market. It took quite some time before it was actually adopted by the military. And today it gets this scary connotation as a assault weapon. But I can tell you, as a former law enforcement officer, that one of my patrolmen, for instance, he was punched in the side of the head. A month later, he died in the hospital. Another one of my patrolmen, he was stabbed in the back with a fork, came a hair's breadth from going through that vest of his into his spine. He was feeling pretty assaulted by that fork. There's numerous other stories I can tell you about this that don't involve guns, but they involve assault weapons because that's what they were used for on that specific day. I remember, what was it, a couple years ago, where a man drove a truck through a parade, I think it might have been in Illinois, mowed down a bunch of people. They were feeling pretty assaulted by that automobile. So we need to be very careful on what we define as an assault weapon. A Henry 22 could be an assault weapon if it's used for that purpose.
You got it. Okay. You can tell I'm getting old too. Okay. So, this is going to be the last question. I apologize for, there's a number of questions over there that didn't get to. We encourage you to meet with these individually. If you've got those questions, and ask those of those people for the time, because we have to close here today. So this one, we'll start with Pete, now that I know Mike was last time. As our district representatives, you are the direct line between Lisbon and Bismarck. What community stakeholders do you contact or plan to work with while representing the people of Lisbon?
Well, it's not just Lisbon, it's also the townships, the county boards, the school boards. You know, Nancy and I made a trip down and had a visit with the Lisbon School Board one time here, and it's one of those things that we need to, it's very important for us to make those connections with all the different agencies, maybe the city council or whatever you have here for city governance. And it's important for us to establish connections and establish trust and establish the fact that the door or the phone or the email or whatever we're using is always open and we're accessible. And I think another thing that we would need to do is we need to be coming down here and have legislative forums during the session so we can keep voters updated on what's going on down in Bismarck. Thank you.
Any and all of the government agencies, from the townships, the school boards, the superintendents, fire districts, park boards, city commissions, county commissions. They're all important to know that whatever we're doing in Bismarck is important to them, or what they want us to do. So keeping in contact with all of them would be top of my list.
Well, when you talk about stakeholders, I think that's all of us. And I would look at what the legislation is that I'm studying and that's being discussed, and I would look at who's most affected by it. If it's a farm bill, I'd contact farmers. If it was an education bill, I'd contact educators. If it was something to do with water in the district, I would contact the people that work with the water plants. I would look for who are those people that will have some knowledge and experience that they can share with me, and they can let me know how it's going to most affect them. And then just to communicate with the stakeholders, the general public. I have a Facebook page. I keep trying to build it and get more people. I might shoot a question out there, see what kind of response people have. I'd always invite people to email me with their concerns. And yes, we would hold regular forums and be in your community so you can come and talk to us.
When I come down to Lisbon, we usually meet out at the fairgrounds, we meet with the county commissioner, the sheriff, kind of meet with all the boards and whatnot. We try to do this at least a couple times a year. That's one of the ways we stay in contact, with your community. And we're always here to be, you reach out to us by email or telephone, whatever, when the issue comes up, and talk to several people from down this area, but we do meet can talk one-on-one, but when you come out and testify, you have the whole committee, and they have to listen to you. You know, for me to try to track down everybody on that board, 16 people, and tell them my opinion, I mean, good luck with that, everybody's busy. But if you come out and testify on an issue, they have to listen to you.
Yeah, I can't, when I was in, Lisbon wasn't a part of District 24, but Valley City was. And I did maintain pretty routine contact with the mayor, the county commissioner, city commission. They would reach out to me on many occasions, and also just the people as a whole in District 24. If there was a subject they were concerned about, they would let me know via email or they'd give me a call. And then, like Dwight said, if there was a bill that they could help get passed, then they would come and testify. And that's what I'd honestly encourage you all to consider. Come down to Bismarck, testify. That's the most valuable thing you can do.
I meet pretty regularly with people across the spectrum. I meet with the mayor, city council in Valley City on a regular basis. But I go to several coffees. I go to coffee in Wimbledon. I go to coffee in Litchfield. I go to coffee at Petro and coffee at the Alley Beans in Valley City. I haven't found the coffee group here in Lisbon yet. I would covet that information. I've tried a couple of times, but I haven't found one yet. I made an arrangement just not that long ago for all of the superintendents, the school superintendents in our district, to come together just at the end of August, and that turned into all of us meeting with them. But I meet with the superintendents on a regular basis. I have half a dozen people from around the district who call me on a regular basis just because they need to vent on somebody, or they have an issue that they want followed, or whatever. But so and also Barnes County, the City County Health, so Township Officers Association. So I mean, I got a whole list of people and groups and individuals that I meet with constantly, and just like these guys said, you know, you come out to Bismarck and we'll listen to you. Thank you very much. But I am connected with a lot of areas in our district, and so it's important, and I try to keep it that way.
So, why don't you stay standing? Okay. That includes our question and answer portion. We're at 8:45. And anybody that knows me, we're 8:49. Actually, I'm a timely kind of guy here.
U.S. Naval Observatory clock.
We're going to go to closing remarks. So starting in this order with Mike, and we'll go through the group. We want you, I believe we have a 1-minute time for your closing remarks for the day. And then after we're done, I'll just do a short
little tap dance for everybody. Okay. Well, thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight and talk with you. I think the questions were great. There were a couple thinkers in there, things I hadn't contemplated before. I appreciate the opportunity to do that. I am very grateful for having had the opportunity to represent you in Bismarck for the last 4 years, and I would hope to continue to do that for the next 4. I'm available at any time, and like I tell people when I'm knocking on doors right now, even if you want to just holler at somebody, give me a call. Don't be bashful. If you're bashful, I can't help you. And I want to serve you well, but I've been married to the same woman for almost 44 years, and I can't read her mind yet. So you're going to have to come and contact me and talk to me in order for me to understand what's going on and what your issues are. Thank you for your attention and your time tonight.
Here's your homework from the old professor. Take some time to look past what incumbents are saying and what the record of voting is. There's the old saying that, the advantage of being an incumbent is everybody knows you and know your voting record. The disadvantage is also the same answer, okay? Consider Mr. Wobbema's vote on the last session not supporting expanding dollars for school lunches. Although they did eventually vote for expanding that, the bill was cut back rather substantially. It was very bad press, bad optics in national news when they voted to change the per diem. That basically put money in their pockets. At our last session in Valley City, he talked about respect and value of all, yet he turned his back on a clergy member because of the message that she had with the Senate and invocation. And you need to make some decisions based on that. Is that acceptable behavior? I'm of the type may not agree with everybody or every legislator, but I feel I have the ability to get compromise and get things done. I want to thank the League of Women Voters for the opportunity. This is incredibly important for the voters.
Thank you. 1 minute, please.
I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters for having us here, the City of Lisbon, and all of you for coming out tonight. I would appreciate your support coming up in the election. Getting back to the last question, I've served on school boards, township associations, and county commissions, and I have not seen these three at any of those meetings. So I don't know where they can stand here and say they've been at those meetings, because they're not.
Well, thank you all for attending tonight, and thank you to the League of Women Voters for sponsoring this event. As you listened to each of us, you had a chance to hear the differences in our priorities. My opponents' records show their lack of support for public education, mental health care, and other issues that are critically important to our communities. If elected, I pledge to collaborate with other legislators who are willing to work toward the common good, the betterment of our whole state, and the care of our earth, no matter what their party. It's time for District 24 to have legislators who still respond, or who will respond to your calls and emails, and work on the issues that affect people every day: food availability, the care of our children, strong public education, affordable health care, accessible health care, affordable housing, mental health care, livable wages and benefits, and safe communities. These are issues I'll work to improve if given the privilege to represent you in our state's legislature. I'd appreciate your vote. Thank you.
It's been a real honor to have your support to represent the people of our district and state legislature. If re-elected, I will continue to use my lifelong experience in agriculture and agribusiness to protect and enrich our agriculture industry. There are many areas that would have been negatively affected without my presence, but in minutes, I won't have to go into any of them. Being on the Human Services Committee, I've seen the needs of the most vulnerable population firsthand. I believe that more access to mental health services in the state is vitally important. I'm very concerned about the impact of term limits on our state legislature will have on its leadership and experience level. I'm also very concerned about the measures to eliminate property taxes. It is estimated that the legacy fund will be exhausted in just a few years if used to replace the funding. So what then? Bring back property taxes, create other funding sources, or eliminate services? I became a legislator because I care about people. I want to preserve what we enjoy in our state for future generations. As your representative, I will continue to use my lifelong experience in agriculture along with my 12 years of experience and influence in the legislature to do my best to represent you.
I had a conversation with a young lady, newly married. Her and her husband have a couple children, and they just recently bought their first home. And she was almost in tears because she's just explaining how tough it is. They're just barely eking by. And I know so many other young folk that are asking the question out there. They're saying, how can I start a family? How could I buy a house? It's just unattainable at this point. And we got to realize that the family is the bedrock of our society. When the family collapses, so does everything else. Pensions, Social Security, businesses, everything. So that's why I'm passionate about Measure 4. That is the reform that we need. It's not just lip service like we've been getting for the last 12 years. Furthermore, I've heard inflation. That's been kind of a trend throughout this meeting. Bidenomics has been a disaster for our country. If you want to fight inflation, then you'll vote Donald Trump for president and all Republicans on down-ticket races. Thank you.
I'd like to personally thank the candidates, Dwight, Dan, Mike, Pete, Shawn, and Nancy, for their active participation in tonight's democratic process. Thank you also to the League of Women Voters and volunteers that helped set this up from both Valley City and Lisbon. The League of Women Voters who have been fostering civic engagement and supporting free and fair elections for over 104 years. That ends tonight's candidate forum. I see there's a lot of cookies back there. Feel free to have some and drink some coffee and continue to chit chat. Thank you.